Clint Eastwood. The name alone conjures images of grit, silence, and unshakable resolve. Over the decades, he's become a living symbol of strength, on screen and off. He's stared down the barrels of 1,000 guns, outwitted villains, and directed some of the most powerful films in American cinema. But behind all that bravado, there's one thing he won't face. Not even now, more than 50 years later. It's not an enemy. It's not a critic. It's not even a scandal. It's an episode of television he filmed in 1970. Just one. A single, rarely mentioned performance buried in his early career that he flat out refuses to watch, ever. No interview, no retrospectives, no director's commentary, just silence. And while most of Hollywood is obsessed with nostalgia and legacy, Eastwood treats this moment like a ghost. Some say it was too emotional. Others claim it revealed a side of him he never wanted the public to see. Whatever happened on that set, it clearly shook the man who's made a career out of never blinking. So what exactly happened in that forgotten piece of television? Why does Clint Eastwood pretend it never existed? And how did one episode become the only thing he's still running from? Let's unravel the mystery, because what's buried in the past doesn't always stay hidden forever. Long before Clint Eastwood became the face of gritty westerns and hard-hitting dramas, he was just another working actor trying to break through on television. His big break came in the late 1950s with Rawhide, a black-and-white western that ran for 8 seasons and turned him into a household name. As Rowdy Yates, Eastwood played the young, hot-headed cowboy with something to prove, a role that mirrored his position in Hollywood at the time. But Rawhide wasn't just a stepping stone. It was a cage. By the end of the 1960s, Eastwood was desperate to break free from the clean-cut TV mold. He wanted darker roles, more depth, more edge. That's when he started dabbling in riskier material, scripts that challenged his image and pushed him into unfamiliar emotional territory. Then came 1970, a strange year for Eastwood. He was still balancing his emerging film career with the occasional television appearance. And somewhere during that time, he agreed to film one specific episode, one that, according to rumors, would end up showing too much of the real Clint Eastwood. Not the gunslinger, not the icon, just the man. And that's where things started to unravel. In 1970, Clint Eastwood was at a crossroads. He had just finished working on a few gritty European westerns, most notably Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, which finally gave him the edge he was looking for. But in between those cinematic triumphs, there was still a lingering tie to television. And during this transitional period, he agreed to appear in an episode that few people today even know exists. The details surrounding the episode are murky. Some say it was a dramatic anthology series, while others insist it was a failed pilot that never made it past a single airing. No official name has ever been confirmed, and it doesn't show up in most of Eastwood's mainstream filmographies. It's as if the project was quietly erased, buried under decades of success. But that silence? It only makes it more intriguing. What little is known paints a very different picture of the Eastwood we thought we knew. Unlike his usual stoic characters, this role supposedly called for deep vulnerability, something rarely seen from him then or now. No cowboy hat, no revolver, just Eastwood playing a man stripped of power, facing inner demons instead of outlaws. Some insiders who claimed to be present during filming later hinted that the script touched on themes Eastwood wasn't comfortable with: loss, failure, emotional weakness. It was a stark contrast to the cool, unshakable persona he had so carefully built. And when the cameras rolled, something happened. Something that made Clint Eastwood, of all people, feel exposed. Whatever was captured that day didn't sit right with him. And the final product? He wanted nothing to do with it. Whatever happened during the filming of that forgotten episode didn't just make Clint Eastwood uncomfortable. It marked him. This wasn't a matter of bad lighting, awkward dialogue, or poor direction. It was something deeper, something raw, something personal. According to sparse insider accounts and whispers that still float around old Hollywood circles, the moment that shook Eastwood wasn't dramatic in the traditional sense. There were no explosive arguments or wild improvisations. It was still, intimate, almost too real. The kind of moment that doesn't look impressive on paper, but lingers in the room like a ghost. They say the scene involved a monologue, just Eastwood, alone, delivering lines written for a character who was crumbling emotionally, psychologically. But as he performed it, something shifted. His voice, typically steady and restrained, faltered. His eyes betrayed something no script could demand: actual pain. Not performed pain, real pain. The crew, by all accounts, froze. No one dared speak. The room was thick with something unspoken. It wasn't acting anymore. It was exposure. And for a man like Eastwood, who had made a career out of never blinking, never cracking, never feeling too much on screen, that vulnerability was terrifying. Some accounts suggest he didn't finish the first take, that he stood up, silent, and simply walked off set without saying a word. Not in anger, not in frustration, in retreat. When he returned, hours later, maybe more, he completed the scene, professionally, efficiently. But that spark, that accidental truth, was gone. And the strangest part? The footage was never reshot. The original take, if it still exists, was reportedly the one that made the final cut. And that's what makes it unbearable. That moment, preserved exactly as it happened, without filters or fixes. Not a performance, but a confession. One anonymous source even said, "You could tell he hated what he saw in himself that day, not because it was weak, but because it was real." And real was never part of the Clint Eastwood brand. It wasn't the script that haunted him. It wasn't the production. It was what he accidentally revealed, perhaps even to himself. Clint Eastwood has always been a man of precision. On screen, he controls every word, every glance, every breath. As a director, he's known for working fast. Minimal takes, no drama, no indulgence. But that control wasn't just a filmmaking technique. It was a philosophy, a shield, a way of living. So when something slips through that armor, especially something captured on film, it's not just uncomfortable, it's unbearable. Those who knew Eastwood during that period say he never once mentioned the episode after filming Wrapped, not even in private. It was as if it had never happened. He moved on to his next project, then the next, with the same stoic discipline. But underneath that calm exterior, something had shifted. One former studio assistant claimed that when Eastwood was sent a copy of the episode, standard procedure for network releases, he returned it unopened. No note, no comment, just rejection. Others have said he instructed his agent to ensure it never made it into syndication or rerun packages, effectively burying it alongside countless forgotten pilots and specials from that era. But unlike those forgotten projects, this one stayed with him. And that silence, that avoidance, it wasn't about shame. It wasn't even about pride. It was about discomfort with what the camera caught, something unguarded, a glimpse of the real man behind the myth. For someone like Eastwood, whose entire career was built on unshakable personas, gritty antiheroes, silent gunslingers, unflinching commanders, one moment of genuine emotional exposure could feel like a betrayal of everything he represented. And more than that, it might have felt like a betrayal of himself. There's a theory among those who've worked in the industry long enough to know better. Clint didn't avoid the episode because he thought it was bad. He avoided it because it was true. Too true. And sometimes, truth on camera feels like losing control. And for Clint Eastwood, losing control, even for a split second, was something he couldn't forgive. To this day, the episode remains a ghost in his filmography. Not officially erased, not denied, just ignored, sealed away. As if watching it would mean confronting a version of himself he spent his entire career outrunning. For decades, the story of Eastwood's lost episode lived in whispers. An insider rumor passed between diehard fans and Hollywood veterans. But in the age of the internet, secrets don't stay buried for long. In recent years, the mystery has reemerged, sparking a new wave of speculation, investigation, and digital detective work. YouTube creators have posted countless theory videos with thumbnails screaming, "Eastwood exposed," or "the episode he tried to erase." Some claim to have found brief clips from the broadcast, though none have ever been verified. Others say the footage was pulled from syndication almost immediately after airing, as part of a quiet deal to bury it permanently. On Reddit and film forums, users have shared blurry stills, alleged script excerpts, and supposed first-hand accounts from relatives of crew members. One of the most talked about theories is that Eastwood himself demanded the episode be removed from circulation shortly after its broadcast, citing creative regret. But there's no proof, just fragments, guesses, and a growing obsession. And that obsession is growing. Each time a new theory video drops or an old interview clip resurfaces, people start digging again, trying to connect dots that may not even be real. The less Eastwood says, the louder the speculation becomes. Ironically, the mystery has taken on a life of its own. The episode, once just a quiet regret, has become a kind of cultural myth. Not because of what's in it, but because of what it might reveal about a man who has otherwise controlled every piece of his public image. And that brings up a deeper question. At first glance, it might seem strange that a man like Clint Eastwood, who's faced down villains, directed brutal war films, and built an empire on stoic masculinity, would be haunted by a single, obscure TV performance. But that's exactly what makes this story so compelling. Because it's not about the episode, it's about the man. Throughout his career, Eastwood has controlled every inch of his public image. The strong, silent type. The no-nonsense cowboy. The sharp-eyed director who keeps his emotions tightly guarded. That image wasn't an accident. It was a carefully constructed shield. And it worked. For decades, fans saw him as invincible. But this one forgotten episode cracks that illusion, even if we never actually see it. The very fact that he avoids it tells us more than any interview ever could. It shows that behind the hard stare and iconic growl is someone just as vulnerable, just as human as the rest of us. We often think of legacy as the sum of a person's successes, but just as often, it's defined by what they hide. For Eastwood, this moment, whatever it was, represents something he couldn't control. And when you've spent your entire life being in control, that loss of power can be more terrifying than anything on screen. In a strange way, the episode has become a symbol, not just of Eastwood's discomfort, but of the cost of being untouchable, of the emotional debt that comes with never showing weakness. And perhaps, deep down, that's why he can't watch it. Not because it was a bad performance, but because it was too honest. And maybe, just maybe, that honesty was never meant for us. Clint Eastwood has faced everything from outlaws and war zones to political controversy and aging in the spotlight. But the one thing he's never confronted is that forgotten episode from 1970. No rewatch, no reflection, no explanation. Maybe it was just an emotional misstep. Maybe it touched a nerve that was never supposed to be exposed. Or maybe, for one brief moment, the mask slipped. And what we saw wasn't the cowboy, the director, or the icon, but the man. And that, more than anything else, might be what still haunts him. Because no matter how tough you are, no matter how carefully you build your legend, there's always that one thing you wish you could erase. For Eastwood, it's not a scandal, not a failure, not even a flop. It's a moment of honesty, too raw to relive. But what do you think happened in that episode? Was it vulnerability, regret, or something deeper? Drop your theory in the comments. And if this left you curious, hit that subscribe button. Because when it comes to old Hollywood legends, the real stories are always the ones they never wanted you to hear.